Stan Lee has passed away at 95 years old. Not only did this man create an empire that almost everyone loves, but he was a genuine man who just loved to see people smile. I had the pleasure of working under him for some pop culture conventions, and all he wanted was to see fans smile and enjoy his legacy. He loved to joke with those around him, and he would tease the ever-loving hell out of everyone he could. I remember him using his motorized scooter to get around backstage, and his poor assistant would speed walk to keep up with him, but he would just keep increasing the speed until she was running beside him. A wicked grin on his face the whole time. Or how he would constantly make his staff repeat themselves "what I didn't hear you" until they had repeated themselves 4 times, witnessing that initially made me sad, thinking his hearing was poor, until he looks at me with that same grin and winks. My time with him was short, but I'm so glad I got it. This man changed my life before I even met him, and he made a huge impact when I did as well. R.I.P. Stan. His wife passed away not too long ago, too. It must have been lonely to all of a sudden be without his life partner. A friend and I snuck into a premiere party for a movie. That's an act like you long story on its own. But we spotted Stan Lee, surrounded by a posse. A lot of pretty girls and some serious handlers. Here we were, just average idiots in a place we weren't supposed to be. We approached, just wanting to say hello and thank him for his work. The handlers were not having any of it and started to move us along. He stopped the handlers and said hello to us. I got to shake his hand and thank him. He asked if we had cameras. I was kinda dumbstruck by the moment, and forgot cameras existed. He actually wanted to pose for pictures with us. Still have the photo, and a nice memory of a pretty great guy who was good to his fans. Edit. He was the highest grossing actor of all time if you include cameos and supporting actors. Seriously, there was a thread in here I was reading earlier on today about who you can't believe is still alive, and someone mentioned Stan Lee. No frickin' way. I'm 40 years of age. When I was growing up, all the Marvel comics I read featured Stan's soapbox, a short column where he would write about whatever was on his mind. It was like a personal letter every month, and always did such a good job of welcoming all into this little club of misfits and weirdos. Stan is different than most of my heroes in that when I think of him, I'm always 13 again. I guess over the next few years we will see how many future cameos were filmed early. It will be nice to still see him and know that there is more to look forward to. Goodbye to a great mind. Between him and Hawking it's been a terrible year. Both changed the world in their own ways. Damn, one last cameo in Endgame made me cry. X200B RIP to a real one. Mods, can we please ban those "who is still alive" posts? This tragedy could have been avoided. I hope the children who fought and bickered over his money don't see a dime. The year was 2008. I was a high school senior at a college preparation workshop. The instructor presented a quick essay prompt: write about who you are. Having been amazed and greatly inspired by the very first MCU movie just recently, I pulled off the top of my head, "I'm An." This went on to become the basis of my admissions essay, and I owe my choice to pursue a career in engineering to Tony Stark. Thank you, Stan Lee. I know it's silly to mourn public figures who you never personally knew, and obviously my grief pales in comparison to the grief of his loved ones, but this one in Iwata really got to me. I knew Stan Lee before I knew who the hell he was. He was the guy with the cool voice who narrates my Spider-Man game on N64 when I was a child. It wasn't until years later that I learned it was his voice, but even before then I learned the name of Stan Lee. He helped create my favorite superhero, Spider-Man. He gave my father a line of comics to pass down to me and form a closer connection between the two of us. And he created a character who taught me that I'm not powerless just because I was a kid. While it's easy to write off comic books as a child's entertainment medium, his work really did have a lasting impact on my life, and that impact has in turn helped me touch the lives of others with his works. I never discuss this outside of my clinical setting, but I use the themes and tropes of Spider-Man in my practice to help clients, many of whom are not particularly intellectual, understand concepts like codependency and hero complexes. Thanks to Stan, I'm able to explain very complex ideas to my clients and help them overcome what I've come to call Peter Parker syndrome. So, even beyond his personal impact on my own life, I owe Stan Lee a great debt. His is an influence that will be missed. Marvel games, movies, and media at large will simply not be the same without him. Through the act of creating superheroes, Stan Lee himself became a superhero, a household name that influenced generations of people all around the world. May he rest in peace, but may his legacy continue to resonate with men and women of all ages for generations to come. Edit. Since people were asking what Peter Parker syndrome is, I'll copy-paste my response here. It's an allegory I use to illustrate certain themes. It's how I explain codependency and hero complex to clients. I started by introducing Spider-Man and his real identity. I outlined to my client that, Once Peter gets his powers, he goes all in on being Spider-Man. A running theme in the books is that Spider-Man is the real identity, and Peter Parker is the disguise. Anyway, Peter goes all in on being Spider-Man, and it starts to fuck with his life. He loses his girlfriend, drops out of school, loses his job, and loses touch with family, but he doesn't care, because he gets to be the hero and that's what matters most to him. Time passes, and a villain shows up. Wipes the floor with Spider-Man. Then he realizes that the one thing he cares about, being the hero, he can't even do anymore. In some storylines, he gives up and puts away the costume. Slowly but surely, he rebuilds his life. He starts dating again, re-enlists in school, gets a new job, starts having hobbies again. And for the first time in a long time, Peter is happy. Then the villain comes back. In the absence of anyone else who can help, he inevitably puts the mask back on and fights. And he wins. And what he learns and then unlearns because the universe is reset is that, in order to be a good Spider-Man, he has to be a good Peter Parker. And when Peter suffers, so does Spider-Man. I then relate the client's self-care to their Peter Parker and their desire to be there and care for others to their Spider-Man, to illustrate that they cannot engage in the selfless acts they want to if they do not take care of themselves first. A seemingly simple idea that a lot of my clients struggle to wrap their head around. I then have them keep a running tab of how Peter Parker is doing each day to find gaps in self-care. Stan Lee dying is like David Attenborough or the Queen dying. I refuse to believe it's possible until it is. I know I'm late to this post, but I met him when I was 17. Shook his hand and asked him some questions and had a muffin with him. He is my hero. I didn't have the most active male role models in my life and I used comics to fill that void. I learned more from Spider-Man about responsibilities than anyone. I learned all about racism at a young age through X-Men and I learned patriotism and to always fight the good fight through Captain America. Of course I learned weird things like don't go through space portals or don't inject yourself with a weird virus as your girlfriend tries to kill you. But most importantly I learned there is others out there like me who also were alone and needed someone. I grew up when it was still lame to be a nerd and I was bullied for knowing what the circle in Iron Man's chest was. My first fist fight was over Spider-Man. My first memory of my dad is him reading me West Coast Avengers. To Stan Lee, thank you. You helped me grow up and become a much better person than I would have become without you. I owe you so much and it hurts I couldn't give you more than a smile when we met. But he called me a true believer. So do all the other true believers out there. Keep believing in yourself and others. I love you all. Marvel Comics were my childhood and even now are a huge part of my adulthood. His amazing stories enthralled me as a kid and continue to inspire me as an adult. Me and my generation will be forever grateful to this man's imagination. Through the genre of superheroes he spurred our interest in technology and science, opened our eyes to prejudice and bigotry and permeated lessons of morality and basic human decency. Stan made it a priority that most Marvel superheroes also show a degree of vulnerability and also in many cases X-Men, Spider-Man show them doing the right thing and getting absolutely nothing out of it. Peter Parker would still be broke and mutants would still be persecuted against. This truly is a sad day. But given all of the allegations of elder abuse I'm glad he's at peace now. His legend will live on forever. Rest well true believer. You know it's funny. Stan Lee was a person who brought people together. He wasn't just some comic book writer, he was the comic book writer. If you were a jock, nerd, goth, prep. Every single person knew his name and loved him for what he was able to accomplish in his very long very successful life. 95 years old still acting, still being able to do the things he did with as clear of a mind as his. Today is a day that we lost not only a very loved person but today we lost the greatest comic book hero ever to live. Late diagnosed dyslexia and attention deficit disorder meant I couldn't read at the age of 8. That is until my mom bought me a stack of Marvel comics. Stan is my hero because if it wasn't for him I would be illiterate. My biggest regret in life is that when I met the man I froze and couldn't tell him this. I now teach English. They should make Stan Lee's birthday a national holiday. God fucking damn it. The Queen better stick it out to 2020. His comics were so fucking enjoyable. Another great loss. Mr. Lee, thank you for being my escape from reality. I remember watching X-Men cartoons when I was little and being so fascinated by it. Then I started buying the comics, watched the movies, and now it's a big part of who I am. A quote you said about X-Men was, I wanted them to be different. The whole underlying principle of the X-Men was to try to be an anti-bigotry story to show there's good in every person. You made me believe that hope. The world won't be the same without your incredible presence. Rest in peace and love. God damn it, it's been 5 months and I'm still not over it once I see a post about him passing away.